You can break down any image you want to draw into shapes. And because of that, we're going to work on the importance of shapes. And I'm going to show you 3 images that we're going to work through, where you start with shapes like circles and squares and triangles, and you end with cats and ducks and apples, just so you can see that those shapes are the most important thing you could ever learn when learning to draw. Hey guys, so as you can see, we're going to be doing cats right now, and I'm just started with this triangle, and then you see that the bottom has a big curve to it, and you're going to want to put that. The next thing you're going to do is put a big circle for the head, kind of leaning back a little bit, and then you're going to want to put 2 lines through it, one kind of curving to the top and one curving the same way but angled from the other side. The reason you're going to want to do this is because when I draw these ears, you're going to see I'm going to put one kind of at an angle out, and it's like a triangle, right? And then the next one's going to be right in where that X is. So then I'm going to use that to make another triangle right around that. And that's going to really help you when you're trying to figure out the placement of your ears for your cat. So there you are for that. And it's already starting to look like a cat. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start a little muzzle there, so it's a little rectangle in front of that circle. And you can see it's a little wonky, it's not exactly perfect, which is fine. Then again, we start with the tail, and just before I finish it, I'm going to just show the shapes of the tail so that you can start or pause this tutorial in order to figure out how to do this. So I start with a circle at the end, and then the rest of it is just little tubes. So I'll give you a second to do that. Remember, you can pause this video at any time so that you can follow along more to your speed. And there you have it. I put it a little smaller at the base of the tail because I kind of like the curviness of his tail there. There you go, there's your tail. And then after that, you're going to want to get up to the top here, and you're going to just want to darken that line there because that's going to stay. And then you're going to make a small spot for the neck there that's just under the ear. Then you can go ahead and make your paw there, and all that is just a little bit of a loop and a straight line underneath, maybe a little curve there if you feel extra fancy. And then the same thing for the back foot. Right now I'm following the curve of the triangle, but I am going to change that and straighten out the bottom of his foot later. But right now I'm going to just erase the lines I don't need in the body and the head there, and I think the tail, but we'll see. I don't need any of those lines anymore, and that's why I'm erasing those. You can go ahead and erase those lines too, because then it's going to show that your cat's starting to come to life a little more. And this is more of a cartoony cat, but this is one of my favorite little cats to draw because he's just so fun. And then I'm going to go ahead and solidify a little of those lines so that I don't have to worry about them later. if you see what I just did there, I added a little bit of a bend to that line, and that's a great idea if you want to make the ear look a little more like it's kind of curved outward like a lot of cats tend to have. I did make a bigger bend on the outline of that other ear too, just to make it look like it's sitting on the head a little better. Remember, erase any lines you don't want and then move on, because that's all you need to do for that. You can see I'm just going around some lines that I think I need to fix and work with, and you can definitely do that while we're working. Or if you've paused it and already fixed it, that's great. I know a lot of these drawing tutorials can be a little fast, so I've slowed it down a little bit so that you can follow along and then pause it when you need to without having too much of a hassle. As you see here, I've kind of done like a little bit of a backwards S shape for where his neck meets his back, and then back onto his tail, and then that way it looks kind of like he's bending backwards. And then I'm going to put another bend half circle where that back leg's going to be, just so it looks like he's sitting down rather than kind of missing a spot. If you notice too, I just put a little line in the front paw, or in the back of the paw there, so it looks like it's away from his foot. And now if you're feeling up to it, you can draw another paw. I did this just because I thought it was a good idea, because I like the idea of him swatting at something. If you can see too, I didn't plan on doing this, so I'm kind of just giving myself a little bit of leeway with how I'm kind of drawing it, deciding how I want it to look. And I know that cats have a bit of a bend with their wrist there, so I'm going to just fix that a little bit. And make it how you like it. You're always okay to erase and keep putting in lines. Just remember that those light lines will help you a lot more than those dark lines. If you see me drawing dark lines, it's more because I'm trying to make it visible on the screen for you guys. So there we go. I'm going to put a little bit of bend in those back arm areas there, and I think that'll be good for now. And there we go. Now I'm kind of liking that. So you don't have to do that, but I did, and if you want to because you like it better that way, that's a great idea. I love it. And now I'm putting some of his whiskers in, and that's also why I didn't erase that line there. Now I'm going to be adding some different shading areas, because that's the end part really for this cat. Now you notice that I'm just kind of scribbling them in a bit, and that's because I have a blending stump that I'm going to be using in the next few minutes here. So I'm just going over some spots where I think would be a good idea to shade. And I'm going to erase that tail because I forgot to do that even when I said I would. And then that way I can put a little shading in the tail. And I'm not giving a whole bunch of thought to where that shading's going to be, because I just want to make this a nice light drawing. I'm not going to put anything too dark in it or anything that's overly, well, anything that's a little more work than you need to. This is just kind of showing you how to get into shapes and how to blend with your blending stump, which, as you can see, I don't press very hard with my pencil, and then when I use my blending stump, it'll just smooth that all right out. So I'm just darkening a few lines also. I'm going to add some more shade for the head, and then I'm going to go ahead and grab my blending stump once I've figured out where I want every bit of shading to be. So as you can see, this blending stump, you want to use the tip of it so that you're going to be able to push it around, but just on the edge. You don't want to go straight down with it. So if you see how I'm holding it, that's just what you want to do. And the nice thing about blending stumps is if it goes too far, you can go in with an eraser and completely erase certain lines. So your blending stump and your eraser can actually be a tool for drawing instead of something to completely delete things. So keep that in mind, that your blending stump and your eraser are also just as important as being able to use the other side, the graphite portion of your pencil. So as you can see, it's blending it in quite nicely. It moves your graphite around really well, and it's easier to use than your fingers, guys, so it's awesome. So I'm just going to go ahead, erase parts that I don't like of it. Here I go with this part. I'm very careful with this other ear because it's inside where the head is. So I'm just going to add a little bit of shadow around it to make it look a little more like it's supposed to be there. And as you can see, there's some shading around there. Put some by that other side of his eye. If you feel like adding eyes, you can. They'd just be more forward in the head. And that's why I kind of chose to leave it out a little bit. Oh, camera zoomed out a little bit. That was strange. Anyways, so you can see the paws getting shaded a little more, which is quite great. And all I'm doing is going over all the other parts that I put that pencil mark. So anywhere that I've kind of added that really light scribble. If you add really hard lines again and then use the blending stump, those lines are going to be really hard to get rid of. So just keep that in mind when you're going with this. As you can see, like I said, I flattened out that bottom back foot of his because I wasn't really liking how it was sitting. I want to make sure there's a lot of shading on the bottom because that's probably where the most is going to be. I'm going to leave it a little light there though because there's a lot of space and we don't have a lot of time to go over a lot of shading, so I'm just going to do the most important parts. I think I already said that, but you know. So as you can see, I'm using the side of that blending stump, and remember just to make sure to keep that tip sharp. You can use a light grade sandpaper in order to sand off that color, and just make sure if you're using a darker pencil not to use the same end of that blending stump, or else what's going to happen is it's going to be darker in places where you want lighter, and that's just no good, right? Anyways, the last things that you can do is probably just fix some lines or add some more permanent lines and just erase around if you see anything you don't want on there. And voila, you have a cat. And that's all just making shapes. And like I said, just add some little things everywhere if you feel like doing that. Add more of a nose if you want. But in general, that's pretty much all we're going to do for this cat. You can even go in and darken more lines if you want to, but I'm going to leave him the way he is. I think he looks pretty okay. Maybe add a little more of that. A little more blending stump, darken some areas up there. Well, there you have it. Good job, you guys. So next up is ducks. And ducks are pretty much one of my favorite little creatures to draw because they're just so cute. Oh, I forgot also to add the paws. So if you're going to do that, the little beanie paws there, you can just draw a couple circles and it'll look perfect. All right, now ducks. So as you can see, it starts with another circle. And again, I'm going to draw those lines, but you notice one's facing one way and the other one's facing straight up. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw a big oval underneath it. And you notice that the edge of the first circle and the edge of the bottom circle are right at the same part, and then it goes back more. You might have to make the circle a little bigger later because that's quite a big duck head, but we'll work with that. Alright, so you see now that we drew the back tail area, and that's just kind of like a really big triangle. I'm going to go in and draw another triangle kind of just next to it, but a little farther down, and that's going to be his tail feathers. Then I'm going to draw some feet, and I'm also going to get a little bit going on around the rest of his body here. So I'm going to start with his beak, and you notice the beak is just a triangle, nothing fancy. And I draw the edge there just so you guys can kind of get the idea of where these shapes are and what they look like. I'm going to draw an eye next, and that's going to be right in the top corner of that X, right? So it's right at the back there, and then you notice it's also right at the same level as the top of his beak. Then I'm going to draw a curve inward towards his face and have the front of his beak still pointing up a tiny bit. And that way it gives that kind of duck look. It's got that curved bill there. And then I'm going to go ahead and go over the head and then actually make some little jagged marks for some fur, or well, not fur, feathers. And then I'm going to just bring it down the back, and then I'm going to follow lines around him so that he kind of looks more duck-like than shape-like. So I'm going to go down the back, and I'm going to just go around the edges of these feathers, maybe add a little more jaggedness to them to make them look a little more feathery. And I'm just going to go around the bottom and the sides and just kind of fill in the outside of him. You'll notice I'll erase a little bit to fix some things, and that's okay. I just wanted to erase that so that he looked a little more full and a little bigger, because he, like I said before, it looked like a little bit small of a circle. So I'm just going to redraw in those feet. Now I'm going to go ahead and figure out where his neck's going to go. So I'm going to do a little bit of a curve back, and then I'm going to just bring it out into his chest. Because if you ever look at a duck, they look kind of proud, right? They have that puffed out chest a little bit. And I kind of want to keep true to that. So you notice all the lines I've got there? I'm going to pick one area that I like, and I'm going to just erase that later. Maybe I'll keep it if I like the sketchy look of my drawings, but that's about it. Now you're seeing that I'm erasing all the lines except for the line underneath his eye, and that's because ducks have a little bit of a cheek, and I think that's the cutest little thing about them, is they have a little bump of a cheek there. And I'm going to erase this part of the beak here, and I'm just going to curve it a little more so it looks a little more natural. So if you guys are following along, like I said earlier, you can pause this and then get to the part that I'm at, or if you have just some things you want to fix, that's a great time to do it. Now I'm just going to go ahead and add some bits like this curve for his beak. So I curved it inwards because I think it does it a little more justice. And then I did a little circle at the top edge of that beak just so he's got a little nostril. And now you can see that I'm starting to make his wings. And I'm just kind of drawing them on the inside of that body bit because I don't really want it to look like he's much bigger than he is. And I'm just kind of playing around with how I want his feathers to look. I might not keep it. There's some things I could probably erase with it and maybe just follow their original lines, but I just want to try something real quick. You could keep that and leave the lower part as his tail, but you just want to make sure you're doing what you think you should be with it. So I'm still kind of thinking about it. I'm probably just going to erase it, actually. Sometimes it's better to just keep things the way they are. But that's okay. Just like painting, drawing is a series of corrections and trying to figure out ways to make things work that you feel comfortable with. So I think I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm going to draw in the little leather bits. And I just wipe away all those little eraser marks because they don't really help when you're working with stuff. And then I'm just going to work on those feet and some parts under it. And you can see this is the same as that cat. I'm starting to find spots to shade. So I'm just putting really light scribble marks everywhere so that when I grab my blending stump, then it's going to be really, really easy to just kind of go all over it and darken it. Now I'm going to do what I said before, and I'm going to darken all the spots, and then I'm going to go in with my eraser and kind of detail it a little more that way and erase spots that I don't think should stay, because I'm going to use my eraser as a tool also and not just a deleting device. So it's kind of working with both to create the effect that you want. Because as you notice right now with that blending stump, it gets awfully dark, right? But that's okay. Some people might like it darker, which is fine. If you're doing kind of just a regular little duck like I am, then you know you just want to look for where the lighting's going to be. You notice as I'm putting this shading in that you can see those little cheeks pop up, and that's one of my favorite parts. Like I said earlier, it's just so cute. Best thing too is if you're trying to draw ducks, you can just keep in mind the shapes, or actually take a picture of a duck or a cat or whichever and actually try and draw shapes to match what that animal looks like. It'll really help you out when you're trying to figure out other animals too. But like I said, shapes are king. They will make you able to draw anything if you work hard enough. So here I go erasing little bits, kind of just contouring my duck if you will. Take a little bit off there, maybe take a little bit there. You notice also that I'm always wiping, and that's because I'm just making sure that there's no residue on there that's going to interfere with me working on my creation. So you notice I kind of take away certain things that I'm not really happy with. I want to accentuate that cheek. And then I might just darken that eye a little, because ducks tend to have very dark, beady eyes. And just like that, we've got a duck. So this is a good time to go over some things, fix some things if you want. And then I'm going to just take my blending stump and do his beak a little bit, because I kind of want to make sure that's looking like it belongs. If everything's shaded and the beak's not, it won't look very good, right? So I'm going to just darken some of those lines. And I like the sketchy look of him, so I'm going to keep it like that. But congratulations, guys, you've made it through cats and ducks. And if you're going to head on to the apple, it's a little bit of an easier break. It's just a little more shading and a little less work with shapes, because you're just working with circles after that. Good job. Okay, you guys, we've reached apples. And I know this has been a long video, but you guys are doing amazing. And this is the last circle you're going to have to draw today, I promise. With me anyway. So all you see is I'm doing the same thing with all the other pictures. I'm drawing those two lines that show kind of the direction of where that circle is going to be going. The next thing you're going to see is I'm kind of just flattening out some areas, and that's because apples aren't perfectly round in any way, neither is my circle, but we're going to just make it look more apple-y, if you will. So that's the first bit. The next bit is I'm going to start adding a little bit of a curve on the inside of that circle, and that's going to be the bottom of our apple. You notice I've kind of curved it down a little bit and up on the one side, and that's because when you look at the bottom of an apple, it's got little bumps, right? So we want to just add a little bit of that to make it look more like your apple. And then I'm going to draw my two little rectangles that are going to be the stem there. And I made it have a little bit of a bend because I like when I see apples with those little bends in it. If you do it too long, which mine is pretty close, it could look like a cherry. But I'm going to still go with apple. It might even look like a plum or something, but that's also because we're not going to go far enough to add so much shading to it that it's going to look like a real apple coming off of the tree, which is fine. It's just a sketch of an apple, right? So as you see, all I'm doing now is just starting to add my shading to it and darkening a little bit of those lines. So remember, light shades, and you want your strokes of your pencil to kind of follow the angle of your apple. So it's following those outside lines, right? And you're also shading that way so that it doesn't look like it's going straight up or down or anything. And then you notice I'm going in circular shapes at some times, and that's because I'm trying to make those shadows come up the apple without looking too straight or too perfect in any way, because that'll just kind of ruin the effect. So you see in this way too, I'm going to bring that shading down a bit. My shading's kind of everywhere, but I'm just kind of trying to get the point across that this is your apple, right? And if you look at apples, you'll notice the greens and the reds will add darkness and lightnesses to your picture. This one's just kind of straight out of my head though, so we're going to just go with it. And you can see it's starting to give it a little bit of shape. And so like I said earlier, every time we go through another one of these, you can pause it if you're falling behind. It is a fast video, so you're more than welcome to do that. And just get rid of some of those lines there, wipe away some of that eraser muck. Yeah, and then I'm just kind of erasing around the edges to give it the look of roundness. So you can play with that if you're looking at your apple and you see spots that you think might have that little sheen of light to it, then go ahead and give that a try. You can also go back in with your blending stump and some more graphite, and you can darken even more areas. And that's kind of what I wanted to go through with this one, is using your blending stump to darken this apple as we go. So you'll see different areas that have a little bit darker and a little bit lighter parts. And you see here I'm using my eraser again as a tool. Excuse the dog. And then I'm just going to go ahead and add some spots where I think it should be a little lighter. You can always fix it, like I said, you can add more, add less, depending on what kind of light that apple's in. Right now it's just in our heads, so we're going to work with that. Usually I'd get you to find an X on the page where the light source is coming from, but you know what, right now we're just kind of working on making things with your shapes, right? We will have another video with blending and where your light sources are coming from, but I don't know if I'll get to that yet. So I'm just darkening a few more of my lines, getting into that bottom part there. And I'm really kind of adding a little bit to that bottom of the apple, because that's where that darker bit's going to be. It's a pretty round apple too. If I were to fix it a little bit, I'd probably make a little flatter at the bottom, but I'm going to just leave it for now. Work with some of the shadows and dark parts. So remember, gently working it with the blending stump and your pencil. It's all in time. Just like painting, graphite gets put on in layers, right? You don't want to just do your darkest dark and then start from that, because it's going to be so much harder to fix things and go back to lighter. I'm going to add a little darkness to that apple stem. And look at that, we're almost done. We're just adding a few more little touches. There goes my blending stump. Don't let it run away from you, it likes to. But yeah, so as you can see, it's starting to look more like something, more like an apple. And even when we're done here, you can even keep going and try working more shadows into it yourself, or try and fixing some things. One of the greatest things you can do is actually get a real apple and hold it in front of you and look at the light that hits the apple and see where it hits it, and how smooth certain parts are and how hard some lines are, and really kind of just get that idea of what an apple looks like. So the next time you do one, you'll have that kind of vision in your head of what it should be. Right now I'm actually adding darker shaded parts with my blending stump, because I know there's enough graphite on my blending stump to do that. And I've also put little dots on my apples so I can kind of just spread them out. And I might erase some. You can, you don't have to though. If it looks a little too uniform, which, like if it looks like it's too intentional. But hey, maybe it's spotted, maybe it's got some brown spots on it. We don't know. But there we go, some darker bits. And like I said, this one's way more about shading than it is about having any more shapes involved, because apples are fairly round. They're generally pretty straightforward. And there you have it, you guys. We've got our very own apple. Now, a little bit more shading here and there, and yeah, I think we're pretty good and pretty done. Good job, you guys. You are awesome, and thanks for following along with my video.